blamed the Jews. Let the Russian pogroms begin. The Cossacks burned down their houses and entire villages. About 2.5 million Jews left Russia. Home was a place they would never see again. They just wanted to live a normal life. Their lives became as precarious as that of a fiddler on a roof. About 1 million Russian Polish Jews settled in the Lower East Side, where tenements were built primarily for profit, not comfort. No running water, no bathrooms, virtually no ventilation. Tuberculosis was rampant. They had to deal with the virus of anti Semitism. The summers were brutal. But despite all that, it was still better than having the Cossacks looking over their shoulders. In the year of about 1900, a number of these poor Russian Jewish immigrants went to 42nd Street in the Hudson River, and they got on a ferry that took them to Weehawken, New Jersey. And then they got on a train that took them to the Borscht Belt. At that time, you had Christian farmers operating farms in the Borscht Belt. They were called dairy and chicken farms. So the Christian farmers produced milk and eggs. Their principal market was New York City. But these Christian farmers were not making enough money on just milk and eggs. So they took in these poor Russian Jewish immigrants and they put them into a boarding house with a community icebox, a community bathroom, and a community kitchen. Eventually, these immigrants purchased the farms from the Christian farmers and they built hotels. At one time, there were more than 500 hotels in the Borscht Belt and more than 900 bungalow colonies. So these Russian Jews had experience with that type of farming. When they lived in Russia, they were not allowed to own the land. Russia owned the land, but they were allowed to own stalls for livestock, chickens and cows. If you recall in that film, in that show with Tevye, the poor dirt milkman and Fiddler on the Roof, he had stalls for his chickens and cows. So they had experience with that type of farming. The Christian farmers would pick up the immigrants at the Ferndale, this is the Ferndale train station, with the horse and buggy and take them to their boarding house. This was the Loomis Sanatorium. Many immigrants would contract tuberculosis in the Lower East Side. They would go to the Loomis Sanatorium, Liberty, New York, where Grossingers was located. They used the concept of open air therapy and the treatment of tuberculosis. We can thank J.P. Morgan for that. His wife died from tuberculosis 3 months after their wedding, and J.P. Morgan contributed $85,000 to build the Loomis Sanatorium. The turning point was in 1908 when the Model T Ford came out. Ford used assembly line production to manufacture cars. Now it was more affordable for the average person to purchase a car. Prior to that, automobiles were handcrafted. Here we have Old Route 17. Old Route 17 went through small towns, cow pastures, and farms. It went through mountainous country. You know, the Burma Road in there's a Mount Burma Road in China goes through mountainous country. So another name for Old Route 17 was the Derma Road. The Derma Road. There was always gridlock on Old Route 17. It could take 5 to 9 hours for a person to get from the city to the Borscht Belt. Sunday afternoons were a nightmare. All the hotels checked out at the same time, 2 p.m. So it could take up to 9 hours on a Sunday to get from the Borscht Belt back to the city. The biggest challenge for an automobile was getting up some of the mountains. The most difficult mountain for a car to get up on was the Wurtzboro Mountain. There would be young boys with buckets of water at the base of the mountain, and for 25 cents, you can purchase a bucket of water for your overheated car. The Model T Ford, that was the first car that went up the Wurtsboro Mountain. In the Model T Ford, the fuel tank is under the front seat. The engine is under the hood. There was no fuel pump in this car. The only way it can go up the mountain, the gasoline had to be gravity fed to the engine. So they couldn't go up the Wurtsboro Mountain because the engine couldn't get the last gasoline. So what the driver had to do, he had to go backwards in reverse gear up the Wurtsboro Mountain. And some of the passengers were walking up the Wurtsboro Mountain. And here's the valise. In the early days, people would go up with a valise. If one of those straps broke, some of the contents will fall out of the valise. And the Red Apple Rest. The Red Apple Rest was at the midway point between the city and the Borscht Belt. I would go there often, and I loved their corned beef and cabbage. And they had the best rice pudding in the world. They would put the rice pudding in a tall glass, top it with whipped cream, and top it with a maraschino cherry. One time I'm sitting in the Red Apple Rest, and at the next table was Zero Mistel. He was doing an imitation of a percolator. And one time at my table was sitting Nipsey Russell. Nipsey Russell, the great comedian, did a lot of lines about integration. His famous line was, "A seat on the top deck doesn't mean anything if the ship is sinking." I want to read a quote to you about the Red Apple Rest. In the 1950s, the Red Apple Rest served 350,000 hot dogs and 4 tons of potatoes to 1 million customers a year. Some people didn't own a car, they would come up with a hack or a taxi. It was a black vehicle. The hack would pick up passengers in Brooklyn, go over the Williamsburg Bridge, pick up more passengers in the Lower East Side and other parts of Manhattan. Most of the hacks would stop at the Red Apple Rest and they would compare notes with each other. And they would try to exchange passengers to shorten their journey. "Give me your 2 Grossingers, I'll give you my 2 Neverleys." One hack might say to the other, trading passengers like playing cards, so the drivers could shorten their journey. "I'll give you my 2 Brooklyns for your 1 Bronx." This is how the first bungalow probably looked. There must have been a converted chicken coop. I'm sure there was an outhouse in the back somewhere. And see that wall? That wall represented a handball court. So they took the sport of handball from Brooklyn to the Borscht Belt. And you can see there's a basket. So they took the sport of basketball up to the Borscht Belt. A telephone call for Allison Kantrowitz. A telephone call for Allison Kantrowitz. Well, there were no telephones in the bungalows in the early days. So when Allison Kantrowitz got a telephone call, the entire bungalow colony would know she got a telephone call. So Allison could have done one or two things. She could have gone to the office to receive the call, but some of the larger bungalow colonies, they planted a telephone pole in the middle of the bungalow colony. Attached to the pole was a black box. Inside the black box was a telephone. So in the early days, the Russian Jews that came here in the beginning, these bungalows represented them of shtetls, reminded them of shtetls in Russia. So another name for a bungalow colony in the early days was a transplanted shtetl. In the early days, most wives would be alone in the bungalow colonies during the week with their children, while most husbands worked in the garment center in Manhattan. The husbands would come up Friday night to join their wives. Most of them came up by a train. They were called the husband trains. Before the husbands arrived, the wives would put the curlers in their hair, nail polish, lipstick, and as soon as the husbands arrived, they would make love with their wives. They was called out washing socks. And then the husbands would get a big dinner and playing pinochle in that order. Washing socks, big dinner, play pinochle. When the husbands went back to the city Sunday night, the wives would tell them, "Look, when you get back to the city, I want you to call me so I make sure you get home safely." The husbands would call their wives and they made it a collect call. but the wives would not accept the charges, but they knew their husbands got home safely. So all these people were committing telephone fraud. The single girls at the bungalow colonies, they wanted to meet a guy. That's what they were there for. So, so what the single girls would do, they would put their flats on, hold their high heels, go to a nearby hotel. When they got to a nearby hotel, they would hide their flats in the bushes somewhere, put in their high heels, and hope they can get into a hotel and meet a guy. The Knish man is on the premises. The Knish man is on the premises. The Knish man is one of the famous, popular vendors who visited the popular bungalow colonies. So this is Ruby the Knish man. We're going to come back to him. I wanted to tell you about the Blouse man. There was a great film, Walk on the Moon, about the Blouse man. And then there was Shimmy the Pickle King. He came with a large blue truck. On the side of the truck were painted large pickles. And then there was Chow Chow Cup. Chow Chow Cup was owned by two school teachers from Queens. They only operated their concession in the summer. Chow Chow Cup, without a doubt, had the best chicken chow mein in the entire Borscht Belt. People from the neighboring hotels will go to bungalow colonies to get a sampling of the chicken chow mein. The chicken chow mein came in a cup. The cup was made out of an egg roll in the shape of a cup. And speaking about their egg rolls, they soaked their egg rolls in grease. So when you put their egg roll in a napkin, the entire napkin got soaked with grease, and the grease will go all your articles of clothing. Now we're going to come back to Ruby the Knish man. When Ruby the Knish man entered a bungalow colony, the ladies sitting under the trees playing mahjong, they stopped their game. They grabbed their pocketbook and they went to Ruby. If they stopped their game of mahjong, you know he had good knishes. And Ruby had an announcement when he entered the bungalow colony, and I'm going to read it to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am back. Ruby the Knish man is now on the premises with my delicious and nutritious, hot, homogenized, pasteurized, and recently circumcised kosher knishes. We got today for you potato, onion, kasha, mushroom, and pizza knishes. Come on, folks. I need the money. I got to send my wife to Florida. She's killing me. Buy a dozen, buy 2 dozen. Years later, someone ran into Ruby in Brooklyn and asked him, Ruby, did you ever send your wife to Florida? Ruby laughed and said, yeah, but she made me go with her. So about 7 or 8 years ago, a lady approached me and she said, I'm Ruby the Knishian's daughter. I was so excited I couldn't wait to go home and tell my friends and relatives who I met. She told me something very interesting about her father. He was born and raised in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. His parents started the Knish business in Brooklyn. Ruby would sell knishes off a pushcart in the streets of Brooklyn. He was not a very good student in school. One day they were handing out applications to take the exam for Stuyvesant High School. Stuyvesant High School, a school for gifted children. Ruby got up. The teacher said, why are you standing? He said, I want to take the exam. Ruby took the exam, passed it, and attended Stuyvesant High School. Ruby was drafted in the Army during World War II. Ruby the Knishman was among the first troops to enter the beaches of Normandy in the D-Day invasion. Eventually, Ruby and his troops ended up in Germany. So let's hear it for Ruby the Knishman, an American hero. Oh, food. People would eat to their plots. I have a theory as to why Jews ate so much food when they got to the Borscht Belt. The main reason they left Russia was because of the pogroms. But the other reason they left is food. The Jews who left Russia were the poor Jews. They were getting poorer and poorer. Their families were getting larger and larger. and they were trying to follow the dietary guidelines set forth in Judaism. So when they got to the Borscht Belt, they were trying to make up for decades of deprivation of food. And they told their children what my parents told me: SS, Marty, people in Europe are starving. There could be about 100 people outside the dining room before it even opened. Some people would get up early in the morning, have breakfast, go out and play golf, and go back in and have another breakfast. Some of these guests would eat everything on the menu, and then they would ask their waiter for a side dish of whitefish. Some guest at the table would say, "Oh, I don't eat like that at home. I don't eat like that at home." Back then, when you got home, if you gained weight, that was an indication that you had a good time. Some of these people checked out as cargo. They didn't need a bellhop to check them out. They needed a forklift to check them out. But all this food was a symbol of their success. They couldn't even afford to buy meat when they were in Russia. Now they can say, "I've made it in America. I've achieved the American dream. I've achieved upward mobility." People would steal Danishes. Woman would come down to the dining room in the morning with a big pocketbook. She's throwing Danishes inside her pocketbook. The woman would say, "These are for later, not now. We have for now. But these are for later. Sam, take from their table. If they don't want their Danishes, it's okay, Sam. Take their Danishes from their table." This is the lunch menu at the Concord Hotel. 13 fruits, 9 entrees, 4 soups, 4 cold platters. And some of these people would eat everything off the menu. This is a still picture from the film Dirty Dancing, which was filmed in 1987. And by the way, that film was an excellent portrayal of the Borscht Belt in the 1960s. The owner of the hotel in the film was Max Kellerman. He would get his waiters from the Yale and Harvard medical schools. So they would tell the guest, "Be nice to your waiter. Someday he may become your doctor." Oh, Chinese roast pork on garlic bread, creation of Herbie's restaurant in Loch Sheldrake. Here's a quote from Arthur Schwartz, a restaurant critic. "This sandwich is the ultimate assimilation food." Assimilation is the key word here. When the Jews left Russia, they said, "God, I'm coming to America." They left the Orthodox shtetls of Russia and they arrived in secular New York. As soon as they got on the ship, they wanted to give up some of their Jewishness. They wanted to assimilate into the American society. Many of them wanted their children to go to the public schools so that they too can assimilate into the American society. This was a great Chinese restaurant in Monticello. I used to go there, the Oriental Dragon. Jews love Chinese food. What they liked about the Chinese thought all whites looked the same. And what they liked is the Chinese would cut the shrimp into very, very tiny pieces. And then the Jews said that the wontons looked like kreplach. So they would say, "What I can't see won't hurt." If a rabbi needed 10 Jews for a million, what better place to look than in a Chinese restaurant? And to this day, many Jews on Christmas Day go to a movie theater and a Chinese restaurant. Here's a swimming pool. Ladies and gentlemen, on the West Porch, there will be a symposium given by Robert Morris Sherman about Jewish meditation. Jenny Grossinger, the matriarch, Borscht Belt's first lady, was named one of the 10 outstanding women of the world. Emigrated from Russia with her family. When she was 13 years old, she worked in a sweatshop on the Lower East Side, making buttonholes. She worked 60 hours a week, made $1.50 a week. And then she became a waitress in her father's restaurant in the Lower East Side. In 1914, her father's health had deteriorated. So they moved to the Borscht Belt and they purchased this farm house. They paid $450. They had to pitch tents in the front. It was so popular. And from this farmhouse evolved Grossingers Hotel and Resort, one of the greatest hotels and resorts ever in the history of America. It had its own airport, its own post office. Some of the guests, Cardinal Spellman, Senator Javits, Dr. Jonas Salk, Bobby Fischer, Robert Merrill, Eleanor Roosevelt, Alfred Vanderbilt, and Governor Nelson Rockefeller. Jenny said, you know, when I die, wherever I go, I hope there's a motel there. And I hope they'll let me run it. I know I'll find a lot of my former guests and I'll remember what they like to eat. And my mother will be there to do the cooking. One time a guest asked Jenny for a recipe on chopped liver. Jenny was reluctant to give her a recipe. It could have been a competition. So she thought for a while and said, well, first you need 50 pounds of chopped liver. And that was the end of the conversation. Here's Jenny and Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt, a frequent guest at Grossingers. World War II bonds were sold every week at the hotel. Admittance to special shows in the nightclub was by war bond only. They named an airplane after Jenny in World War II. And there's a story about Robert Max. He was a World War II veteran who had lost a lot of weight during the war. Jenny invited Robert to Grossingers as a guest to gain weight. What's important here, and we're probably never going to see this again, all these bungalow colonies, hotels, they were mom and pop operations. Today, everything's becoming global. The Waldorf Astoria was bought over by a Chinese conglomerate for $3 billion. The Pierre Hotel was now called the Taj Pierre. The Plaza Hotel was bought over by some sheik in the Middle East. The Mandarin Orient Hotel was bought over by the government of Dubai. There's nothing wrong with a foreign country owning a hotel in New York, but it doesn't provide the kind of stories we get from these immigrants. They had to leave Russia. It was involuntary relocation. Their native tongue was Yiddish. Many of them, including Jenny, didn't even complete high school. They were known as the intellectualized workers. They would pick up scraps of knowledge off the street. They were self-taught. They would spend a lot of time at the library learning how to speak and read English. We can thank Andrew Carnegie for that. Andrew Carnegie donated $5.2 million to build 65 branches of the New York Public Library. What a great story. One of the greatest stories in the history of America. There's a swimming pool at Grossingers. The theater nightclub can seat 1,700 people. Jenny would get up on the stage and thank all the guests for being there that night. This theater had been used as a synagogue, a Catholic church, a Methodist meeting hall, Seventh-day Adventist prayer site. People were people, according to Jenny. It didn't matter what your race or religion was. The dining room at Grossingers could seat 3,000 people. I worked as a busboy in this dining room. I was living in the Bronx at the time, still attending school, and I only worked at Grossingers on weekends. So every Friday afternoon, I would head down to the Port Authority bus terminal. I would get on a bus that took a short line bus that took me to the front gate of Grossingers. Since I worked part-time, my station was further away from the kitchen. If you work full-time, your station would be closer to the kitchen. The first night I'm working dinner, and one guest asked me for an iced tea. So I made the long walk to the kitchen. I got the iced tea. I went back to the table, and 3 more guests wanted an iced tea. So my waiter said, Marty, next time someone wants iced tea, bring back 5 of them. So one time I'm working with a European waiter, and one of the guests asked for mandals. He said mandel checked out. And then I remember a man pouring liquid chicken fat over his chopped liver. And it was a famous matzah story. It went something like this. One guest said, I don't want this matzah. I want the Manischewitz egg matzah. Another said, I want the Horowitz margaretten. Another one said, I want stripes. So my waiter took off his apron, handed it to me. He said, here, Marty, you take over. And then one night, my waiter wanted to get dinner. So it was my job to clear the tables off before he could start taking the reservations for dinner. So I cleared the tables, and one guest, this lady, she wanted a half a chicken for dessert. She said there were less calories in a half a chicken. So my waiter said, Marty, go in the kitchen and get this lady a half a chicken. I go in the kitchen, and you have to visualize this. All the desserts are on the counters, ready to be brought out. So I said to the chef, I need a half a chicken for one of my guests. He looked at me. He said, you got to be kidding. He took a line out of the film Five Easy Pieces with Jack Nicholson. He said, tell the lady to take the chicken and hold it between her knees. So I finally got the half a chicken for this lady, and you have to visualize this. Here you have 3,000 guests, many are on their second and third dessert, and this lady is eating a half a chicken. So Jenny would go table to table greeting the guests. I once met a lady who worked the front desk at Grossingers. She told me a man checked in, he wanted room for two. She said, what's the name of the other person? He said, I don't know yet. So every Friday night, many hotels had what was called a champagne hour in a nightclub. The gentleman in the background is Machito. He was the head of a Latin band. So this is a late table picture, a black tie event in Grossingers. The young lady on the extreme left is Elaine Grossinger, Jenny's daughter. She had a daughter and a son. The gentleman in front with a black tuxedo sitting is David Edis. His father owned a kosher butcher in Liberty, New York. David eventually became a doctor, and he married Elaine Grossinger. The lady sitting next to Elaine, the second lady on the left side, is anyone who want to take a guess? Bess Meyerson. Bess Meyerson was the first and only Jewish Miss America. She was crowned Miss America in 1945. By 1945, the Jews had lost everything. She was their symbol. They were still alive. The young lady on the extreme right, take a guess. Betsy Palmer. Betsy Palmer was a panelist, and I've got a secret. She was in that scary film, Friday the 13th. She appeared as Mrs. Voorhees in the film. Eddie Fisher. In 1949, he was 17 years old. He arrived by Grossingers by bus. It was cheaper than taking a train. In 1949, he was a staff singer at Grossingers, making $50 a week. Eddie Cantor discovered Eddie Fisher at Grossingers. Ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Fisher singing Sunrise, Sunset.
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Is this the little girl I carry? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall?
Eddie Fisher met his first wife at Grossingers. Want to take a guess? Give you 5 seconds. Debbie Reynolds. Then they got divorced, and he married Deborah Reynolds' best friend at Grossingers, right? Elizabeth Taylor, you got it. Elizabeth Taylor. Oh, she was beautiful and a great actress. So here's Eddie Fisher, Elizabeth Taylor, and Jenny Grossinger. So Grossingers had a state-of-the-art boxing facility training boxers. This is Rocky Marciano training at Grossingers, and yeah, they had some Muhammad Ali trained at Grossingers. See, here's Willie Mays, one of the all-time greats. It was a Friday evening, and he was checking in at Grossingers. The host was bringing Willie Mays into the dining room. As soon as he brought Willie Mays into the dining room, a lot of guests got up. They wanted to get his autograph. And the host was very concerned. He wanted to make sure that Willie Mays had his dinner. So he said to Willie Mays, look, tell him that you're Jewish and you're not allowed to write on the Sabbath. So here we have Lou Goldstein on the left, Yogi Berra, my idol. I was a big Yankee fan growing up in the Bronx. And that's Harry Grossinger next to him, Jenny's husband. And the gentleman on the right is Rocky Marciano's manager. Yogi Berra, one of the all-time greats. He said, his wife once said to him, Yogi, where would you like to be buried? He said, why don't you surprise me? One time he was in a pizzeria and the counterman said, Yogi, would you like your pizza pie cut into 6 slices or 8 slices? He said, you better make it 6. I don't think I can eat 8. It ain't over till it's over. When you come to a fork in the road, just take it. So Lou Goldstein. Lou Goldstein was known as the Tumbler or the social director of Grossingers. He worked there 40 years. He was married to Jackie Horner. Jackie Horner was a Radio City Rockette, and she became the chief consultant for the making of the movie Dirty Dancing in 1987. And then she became a dance instructor at Grossingers and married Lou in Liberty, New York, where Grossingers is located. Here's a quote from Lou. This is probably the only hotel in the world where the food is kosher and everyone eats like a pig. A few weeks ago, on the day of the eclipse, a lady came outside and saw it was very cloudy. So she said to Lou, Mr. Goldstein, are you going to cancel the eclipse today? The wife tells her husband after a bitter argument that when he dies, she's going to dance on his grave. The husband goes to his lawyer the next day and asks for a new clause in his will. He wants to be buried at sea. Lou refused to mention the Concord by name. Oh, they had a beauty contest over there last week. Nobody won. So what made Lou famous was Simon Says. He made it so popular, it was in sports arenas, and convention halls, and he made it very famous. So what I want to do, I want to recreate a Simon Says. Now, it's a virtual Simon Says, so everybody's a winner. All right, so get ready now. Simon Says, raise your right hand. Simon Says, lower your right hand. Simon Says, raise your left hand. Simon Says, lower your left hand. And then he would pause and he would look at the person in the front row and he said, by the way, what's your name? And they would give him the name and he said, you're out. I didn't say Simon Says, what's your name? That's how he got people out. He had other ways of getting people out. But I want to show you this lady. That's Rosalie Eisman. She won the Simon Says contest in 1954 at Grossingers. And she got a gift. I want to show you the gift that she received for winning it. She got this nail grooming kit. And look at that. It says genuine leather made in Austria. So many Jews would spend Passover in the Borscht Belt for 2 reasons. They didn't have to cook, and for many of them, it was a second home. The Concord Hotel in Kaimashulu, New York. One time, some Japanese guests checked into the Concord, and the waiter said, would you like sushi? And they said, no, we like bagels, cream cheese, and lox. This gentleman, Arthur Wienirik, emigrated from Russia with his cousin, and he lived in the Lower East Side. In the basement of his apartment, he had a barber shop. and he invented Jerry's hair tonic for men. He was he was sold Jerry's hair tonic initially on a push cart, and it became a multi-million-dollar business. One time he wanted to check into Grossingers, and they had no rooms available. He said, "Okay, I'll build my own hotel," and of course he built the Concorde. Afternoon cocktails at the Concorde. The swimming pool at the Concorde. You see in the front, there's a lady with a blue bathing suit. I spoke to her about 10 years ago. Her name was Arlene Rose. She was a payroll clerk in 1966 at the Concorde Hotel. Here's the great lobby at the Concorde. So before dinner, there'd be a long line of ladies waiting to get to the vault to take their jewelry out. And they wanted to wear their jewelry for dinner and a nightclub. After the nightclub performance, they would return their jewelry to the vault. So I want to share with you an interesting story. Back in the early 1960s, they had an all-single weekend at the Concorde, a special price. I took advantage of it. I checked in Friday. I stayed until late Sunday. All the meals were included. Use of all the facilities was included. Shows, everything. What do you think the entire weekend ran me? $35. $35. I went to the Second Avenue Deli last week in Manhattan. I got a pastrami and rye, a Doc Brown soda, and a side of fries. It ran me almost $50. This is the last remnant of the Concorde Hotel. Now, on the Concorde Hotel is a casino, first casino that was built in that area. So there's a remnant. But what's interesting about this, I belonged to a ski club at one time, and in the winter, this is my favorite ski slope. So when I saw this, somebody gave me that picture. It really brought back great memories for me. Jim and Randy, they all got their start in the Borscht Belt. Jimmy Durante, his mother was a mail order bride. His father was a barber. Jimmy was born in the back of his father's barber shop. His biggest fan was John Barrymore. John Barrymore was a great Shakespearean actor. He loved Jimmy Durante. One day he said to Jimmy, "Jimmy, how would you like to appear in Hamlet?" And Jimmy said, "I don't play in a small town like that." Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Durante singing "Make Someone Happy," to this day, one of the greatest songs about brightening up a person's day. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's so important to make someone happy. Make just one someone happy. Make just one heart-to-heart you. You sing to one smile that cheers you.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are. Mrs. Calabash could have been a secret lover. It could have been his wife. It could have been a name on a railroad station sign. When he said goodnight, Mrs. Calabash, he was saying goodnight to all humanity, you and I. Irving Cohn, maitre d' at the Concorde for about 50 years. He was known as the King Cupid of the Catskills. He had the ability to see the nice Jewish girl next to a nice Jewish boy. He had a pegboard in his office. The blue pegs represented single Jewish boys, the pink pegs, single Jewish girls. If you got married, as a result of his matchmaking, you would get a free weekend at the Concorde. But you know, being a maitre d' is a very difficult job. And he knew how to handle difficult situations. They always had a metal tag on a kosher chicken in the kitchen. And it was the job of the staff to remove all the metal tags from the kosher chickens in the kitchen. Apparently, they forgot to remove one metal tag. This lady's eating a chicken. She had the metal tag on the chicken. It cracked a tooth. She went over to Irving Cohn. She said, I'm going to sue you and I'm going to sue the hotel. So Irving Cohn took the microphone. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to congratulate the lady that had a metal tag on a chicken. She's going to get a free weekend at the Concord. Dance lessons were a very important activity. It was one way to work off all those calories. Max and Louis Kutcher, two brothers. They bought this farmhouse in 1907, took in summer boarders. And at that time, there was no GPS. The directions to get to hotels were on a billboard. So I'd like you to follow the directions on a billboard and how to get to Kutchers. Follow the bouncing ball to Kutchers. Follow Route 52. Turn left at the traffic light in Luxsheldrake. And we have Kutchers, one of the great country clubs in the Borscht Belt. So Milton and Helen Kutcher were second generation Kutchers. And that's Will Chamberlain on the right. But Milton loved sports. His first athletic director was Red Auerbach. Red Auerbach, one of the all-time great basketball coaches. He coached the Boston Celtics to multiple championships. In the summer, Milton had a Kutcher Sports Academy, a summer camp emphasizing sports. And then in the summer, he held what's called the Maurice Stokes Benefit Game. Maurice Stokes was a professional basketball player who had become disabled and was in need of money. So every summer he would have an event. He would invite basketball players and raise money for disabled basketball players. So Will Chamberlain was a bellhop working in the summers at Kutcher's, and while he was attending high school and college. So here he is checking in a guest. If he had to check in a guest on the second floor, he didn't walk up to the second floor. He would just put the luggage right through the window. This is Vivian Pressman. This is still from the film Dirty Dancing. Vivian Pressman was known as a bungalow bunny. The bungalow bunnies were the wives who were at the hotels during the week by themselves, while the husbands worked in the city. Back then, many of the husbands worked in the garment center. When the husbands came on Friday evening, the bungalow bunnies were ordinary wives. But when the husbands went back to the city Sunday night, the wives were on the loose. They became the red hot mamas. They became the swingers. They put on their high heels. They put on a dress with the low cleavage. They changed their hairstyle. Homoac Lodge in Spring Glen. I was once a guest one weekend at the Homoac Lodge. I'll never forget this. It was a Saturday night, and it was going to be a big pre-dinner buffet. Get that? Pre-dinner buffet at 6:30 p.m. I arrived at 6:35 p.m. I was only 5 minutes late. The only thing left on the buffet table was the Jell-O. And Freddie Roman, one of the all-time great comedians, he got his start at the Homoac Lodge. He was a social director there. So this husband and wife were married for 48 years. And the wife got very sick and she died. After the funeral service, the pallbearers are carrying the coffin out, and the coffin hit the wall. And the wife woke up. She says, I'm alive, it's a miracle, I'm alive. 4 more years go by, and the wife gets sick again, and she dies again. After the funeral service, the pallbearers are carrying the coffin out, and the husband yells out, don't hit the wall. Adam and Eve are walking in the Garden of Eden one day. Eve looks up at Adam and says, Adam, tell me the truth, do you still love me? Adam said, who else? This 92-year-old man marries a 92-year-old lady. And at wedding night, she calls down to him. She said, Sam, would you like to come upstairs and make love? He said, Sylvia, I can't do both. There were these two elderly gentlemen, and they were sitting on the front porch of the senior citizen house one day. One of them said to the other one, I'm going to ask you this question again. Was it you or your brother was killed during World War II? This 85-year-old man gets a surprise birthday. and they wheel out a big cake. Out of the cake comes a naked girl. She said, "Who would like soup of six?" He said, "I'll take the soup." And then this man, he went to a senior dance. He met this lady there. He asked her for a number. She said 140 over 75. And then this 80-year-old man went to his doctor. He said, "Doctor, I'm having a problem." The doctor said, "What's your problem?" "I'm 80 years old. I'm having an affair with a 40-year-old lady, and we're having great sex. We get up in the morning, we have breakfast, we take a long walk, we go back to my apartment, we have great sex. We go out for dinner, we go to the theater, we come back to my apartment, we have great sex." So the doctor says, "So what's your problem?" He said, "The problem is I forgot how to get back to my apartment." And there were these two elderly gentlemen, Ben and Stan. They had been friends for many years. They loved baseball. They had attended many baseball games together. Stan got sick, ended up in a hospital. Ben visited him in the hospital. He said, "Stan, you have to promise me one thing. When you die, you have to let me know if there's baseball in heaven." So Stan died. One day, Ben is walking in his backyard and he can hear Stan from heaven. He says, "Ben, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is there's baseball in heaven. The bad news is you're going to be pitching on Tuesday." So this lady is being examined by a doctor. And the doctor said to her, "Do you have intercourse?" So she went in the waiting room. She said, Sam, do we have intercourse?" "No, I told you we have Blue Cross." Jerry Lewis made instrumental in making Brown's Hotel very famous and located in Loch Sheldrick, New York. I was a busboy at Brown's before I became a busboy at Grossingers. It was a terrible experience. They didn't let us eat the guest food. We had to eat the leftovers, and it was awful. So what I would do, I go in the kitchen, I order an extra steak. I would take the steak and wrap it in a linen napkin and put it in my server. Whenever there was a break in the action, I would take a quick bite, then another bite, and I can attribute my bad eating habits to this day at working at Brown's. And then the telescope, Lucille Ball and Gary Morton. Gary Morton lived on Kruger Avenue of the Bronx. This was her second husband. Her first husband was Desi Arnaz. Oh, this is a great deli, Kaplan's. What a great deli. Probably the best pastrami in the world. Many celebrities ate at Kaplan's after performing in the local hotels. It was family operated. The one rule of the family was that no one gets married, gives birth, or dies during the summer. Brickman Hotel. Two words they made Brickman Hotel different than other hotels: no lunch. Throughout the day, they kept announcing no lunch, which is not included in the hotel. Bingo, bingo, bingo. That's right. It's Thursday night. It's bingo night. Morris Katz, king of schlock art, king of toilet paper art. He holds a Guinness World Record as the world's fastest painter, 30 seconds to make a painting. He uses a roll of toilet paper in each hand, and he rolls down the canvas with the toilet paper. Red buttons, and like I said before, they all got their quote in the Borscht Belt. I want to read a quote from Red Buttons. "I remember the Catskills, I remember the Blintzes almost as good as my mother's. I could taste the sour cream. I thank God for placing those mountains so close to New York City. The Catskills gave me my career." So Red Buttons, his name was Aaron Schwatt.
Oh,
And he worked at Ryan's Tavern in City Island as a bellhop. And as a bellhop, he had large buttons on his jacket and red hair. So that's how we get the name Red
red.
Buttons. Yeah. And a lady told me an interesting story once. Her mother was getting dressed in a hotel room to get ready to go to the dining room. She couldn't pull the zipper up in the back of her dress. So she knocked next door and Red Button answered, and he helped her with the zipper, and she told him, I and my family, we love you. So he said to her, look, why don't you get your family together in the lobby and I'll meet you there? And he did. He did a whole shtick for this lady and her family. Sid Caesar, that's Florence. That was a fiancé back then. And Florence's uncle owned the Avon Lodge. Another name for the Avon Lodge was the House of Joy. Sid Caesar was a sax player living in Brooklyn, not making much money. So what he would do, he would go into the automat, get a cup of boiling water, and pour ketchup in it. His father emigrated from Ellis Island to New York. His father's first job when he arrived in New York, he would earn 50 cents a day for breaking in new shoes for people. And then his father opened up a restaurant in Yonkers, New York. And it was in that restaurant, Sid Caesar would go from table to table, learning how to mimic those facial expressions that he used in his TV shows. Sid Caesar imaging Coca and Annette Fabre in The Commuters. Henny Youngman, king of the one-liners. He only worked the Borscht Belt in the summer. Someone said, Henny, what do you do in the winter? He said, in the winter, I wear my overcoat. So he's born in Liverpool, and then he moved to New York, met his wife, Sadie, in New York. They lived in Ocean Avenue in Brooklyn, and he spent his later years in Manhattan. Henny would tell his friends that when he was born, he was very ugly. He was so ugly when he was born that the doctor would slap his mother. He was so ugly that the nurses in the maternity ward would insist that the windows of his incubator be tinted. He was so ugly that they put a picture of him by the word dictionary. He was supposed to get bar mitzvah when he was 13 years old. His cousin died the day before his bar mitzvah. His parents never rescheduled it. So when Henny was 75 years old, he got bar mitzvah at a hotel in Atlantic City. He would tell all the guests, take my bar mitzvah, please. And then one day he was performing at a theater in New York, and Sadie, his wife, brought in a lot of friends to meet him. They're standing behind a curtain and they're talking and talking. Henny he had to get on the stage. He called over an usher and he said to the usher, here, take my wife, please. One time Henny was looking for a lawyer. He went through the yellow pages and he sees a law firm, Schwartz, Schwartz, and Schwartz. Henny calls up. Man answers the phone. Henny said, is Mr. Schwartz in? Oh, he's on vacation today. Is Mr. Schwartz in? He's out playing golf. Is Mr. Schwartz in? Speaking. One time Henny was at a book signing. A lady came up to him and she said, Lenny, what do you attribute longevity to? And he said, I'm sorry, what do you attribute longevity to? And he just looked at the lady. He said, breathing. That's what he said. So one time, my wife said to me, for our anniversary, I want to go somewhere I've never been before. I said, try the kitchen. I just got back from a pleasure trip. I took my mother-in-law to the airport. My wife drowned in a swimming pool because she was wearing so much jewelry. The convict was going to the electric chair. He called his lawyer for some advice. The lawyer replied, don't sit down. And Rodney Dangerfield, the king of no respect. I used to go out with his teacher. Whenever I made a mistake, she made me do it over again. And my wife and I were happy for 20 years. And then we got married. It's been a rough day. I got up this morning, I put a shirt on, and a button fell off. I picked up my briefcase, and the handle came off. I'm afraid to go to the bathroom. I've been taking Viagra and prune juice. I don't know if I'm coming or going. And George Burns, like I said, they all got their start up there in the Borscht Belt. When George Burns was 98 years old, he said, how can I die? I'm booked. I go out with women my age, but there are no women by age. First, you forget names, then you forget faces. Next, you forget to pull your zipper up, and finally, you forget to pull it down. Everything that goes up must come down, but there comes a time when not everything that's down can come up. Milton Berle. Milton Berle had that Texaco hour on Tuesday night, and from 8 to 9 o'clock at night. It was so popular, many restaurants and clubs were closed. And I've been told that many people, when they watch this show from 8 to 9 o'clock at night, if they had to go to the bathroom, they would hold it in. So by 9:05 p.m., there was a drop in the reservoir. Milton Berle married his first wife a second time. And his friend said, why? He said, because she reminds me a lot of my first wife. Dancers, actors, this is your lucky day. Auditions are being held for the season-ending talent show Report to the Playhouse. And Sammy Davis Jr. appeared in a lot of different hotels. You know, he converted to Judaism in 1950. And then he was down in the South one day, and he got up on a bus. The bus driver said to him, you have to sit in the back of the bus. So Sammy Davis Jr. said, but I'm Jewish. So the bus driver said, well, then you have to get off the bus.
Candyman, hey, Candyman.
All right, everybody, gather around. The Candyman is here. Now, what kind of candy you want? Sweet chocolate, chocolate malted candy, gumdrops, anything you want. You've come to the right man because I'm the Candyman. Who can make a sunrise? Sprinkle it with dew. Cover it with chocolate and a miracle or two. The candy.
So I'm going to talk about the decline of the Borscht Belt. This is the demolition of the Concorde. They declared bankruptcy in 1998. This is a shell of the coffee shop in Grossingers. A shell of a hallway in Grossingers. The indoor swimming pool at Grossingers. So there are a number of reasons for the decline of the Borscht Belt. This is a scene from the film Dirty Dancing, and that's Max Kellerman, the owner of the hotel. And he's standing next to the band leader. And this is what he said. It all seems to be ending. It feels like it's slipping away. You think kids want to come with their parents and take foxtrot lessons? Kids want trips to Europe. That's what the kids want, 22 countries in 3 days. So airfares have come down. Now it's more affordable to take an airplane somewhere than going to one of the leading hotels in the Borscht Belt. Also in the 1950s, you had air conditioning coming out. Now people could stay at home in their apartments with the air conditioning on. Also, television came out around 1948-50. Now people could stay at home and watch these celebrities on their televisions. Also, feminism. In the early days, many wives were stay-at-home moms. They can spend the entire summer in a Borscht Belt. Now, with women going back to work, that would have been impossible. And then assimilation. Now, places that were prohibiting Jews from entering their facility were opening up to Jews. So now Jews have more places to go to. And Jewish migration. A number of Jews were heading down to Florida. And camps. Many hotels and bungalow colonies had camps, summer camps. And post-World War II, there was a mass exodus of people leaving the cities to the suburbs, and they built camps there that were competing with the camps in the Borscht Belt. And last but not least, computers. Dating apps. Many seniors use dating apps today. It's called hooking up in the digital age. So here's a scene from the film Dirty Dancing. I've had the time of my life. It was not filmed in the Borscht Belt because by 1987, there was a serious decline of the Borscht Belt. So it was filmed at the Mountain Lake Hotel in Virginia. And to this day, they have Dirty Dancing weekends at the Mountain Lake Hotel. So just some more comedy from the Borscht Belt. I've been in love with the same woman for 25 years. If my wife ever finds out, she'll kill me. What are 3 words a woman never wants to hear when she's making love? Honey, I'm home. The nurse goes to the doctor, says, Doctor, there's a patient in the waiting room. He said he's invisible. The doctor said, just tell him I can't see him. The doctor gave a patient 6 months to live. He couldn't pay his bill. So the doctor gave him another 6 months to live. The doctor called Mrs. Cohn and said, Mrs. Cohn, your check came back. Mrs. Cohn answered, so did my arthritis. The Harvard School of Medicine did a study as to why most women like Chinese food so much. The study revealed that this is due to the fact that wonton, spelled backwards, is not now. So that completes the lecture. This is my email. We're going to go into a Q&A now. I'd like to get an email from you regarding any comments. And Carol's going to read anything off the chat. So let me just get over there. Stop the share. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So you can unmute yourself if you have a question or comment.
Thank you so much for that presentation.
Oh,
Larry,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yeah. Hi. I always love your lecture.
Oh, I've seen you before. How
Yeah,
you
yeah, well,
doing?
I'm doing baseball and basketball.
You're
Yeah,
my
look,
groupie. You're my groupie.
No, you mentioned I'm the one who wrote in about the film about Will Chamberlain, Borscht Belt, bellhop.
Yeah.
A lot of what happened is all the hotels, they would form their own basketball teams, and
Yeah.
from high school students, they couldn't play when they were in college.
Right. Right.
They would consider getting money.
Right.
So
It's
Chamberlain.
funny though, they had
Right.
to raise money for disabled players. Now basketball players are making like
Oh.
$30 million a year.
So Chamberlain played for Kutchers, and they'd have they have league. They had their own league.
Yeah, and Red Auerbach
different-
was their first coach. He was the greatest coach that ever lived.
Okay, a good friend of mine who just recently passed away. His name was Warren. He played for one of the other hotels,
Right.
and his coach. When they went the first time they went to Kutchers. Now Warren was tall. He was like 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
And coach says, "Guess what? You get the big guy." And he said he's proud. He kept his Chamberlain's pants were taller than him. He's proud that he held him 57 points.
Yeah.
I want one more thing too, but this is more serious. You're talking about Maurice Stokes. What had happened was he had suffered an encephalitis. That's what crippled him.
Yeah.
Luckily, Jack Twyman, the Hall of
Right.
Fame,
I remember the name. Yeah.
right, Jewish ball player.
Yeah.
He is the one who set up this the Stokes game and a
Yeah.
whole foundation too for
Yeah.
encephalitis research. So even
Right.
after he died in 1970,
Yeah.
there's still the game until Kutchers went out of business. They still had it every year, and they still donate money for these research. So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
What's your first name again?
Larry.
Larry. Okay. I should know your first name by now. Thank you, Larry. Anybody else? Any questions?
We have a lot of thank yous in the chat and comments throughout your program that people found, it was funny and their various experiences, but there's no actual questions.
All right.
Actually, the last one is a question. It says, are all of these resorts closed now?
They're all closed. What you have, I think it was Kutchers is like a yoga center, health center. That's what I heard. They're all closed. What you have, a lot of Hasidic Jews go there in the summer. Most of them are from Brooklyn. Many of them belong to the Satmar sect, the ultra-Orthodox, and they occupy a lot of the bungalows. That's in the summer. Also, some developers are building homes there that are serving as retreats for people to live in Manhattan, a second home. Yeah, so, and then they have the casino there at the Concord. There's Lego World open at Goshen, New York, which is close by. And but the casino, the last I heard, not doing that well. The area, like in Monticello, there it's very poor. There's a lot of poverty and drugs, and they were hoping that the Asian market will cater to the casinos. That would be their primary customer. But there's a lot of competition now with casinos. So the last I heard, they weren't doing that well. But it's the only casino that's up at the present time in a site of where the Concord was.
And the next question says, did you know Tamarack?
Tamarack.
This is, yeah, that's all the question says.
Yeah, Tamarack Lodge, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't stay there. I certainly heard of it, of course, sure. But I wasn't a guest there. I was a guest at the Homowack Lodge, I mentioned that. And then, even though I worked at Grossingers, I was a guest at the Concord a number of times. That was our favorite hotel, my friends and I, staying at the Concord as guests. But of course, I never worked there.
And then we have a question. Do you remember Sullivan's in Liberty?
No, I don't, no.
Okay.
But I want to tell you one interesting little tidbit. When I worked as a busboy, when I got the job as a busboy in Grossingers, the rest of the staff would tell me, Marty, tell the guests you're going to medical school. You get a better tip that way. So I would tell them I'm going to go to Harvard Medical School, and boy, I got a good tip.
And it says, any edgy comedians like Lenny Bruce in the Borscht Belt?
Well, Lenny Bruce was a little brisque, he, yeah, that's the comedians that I mentioned to you, they didn't use the 4-letter word. They didn't use obscenities. Yeah, they didn't, no.
But didn't he used to play like the late shows at some of these places?
Lenny Bruce, maybe he did, but
Yeah,
not
like
common.
Yeah, like the
most of
ones
them.
after midnight.
Yeah, Jackie Mason was big, and yeah.
Right,
I picked the comedians, the comedians that I picked, like Buddy Hackett, his jokes were long, and you'd have to wait for the punchline. So I liked it for my lecture, pick comedians with the one-liners, like Henny Youngman and Dangerfield. So for my lecture, they were more appropriate. Rather than go, with a long-winded joke, you're waiting for the punchline.
Well, it's like I wrote, I don't know if you read that Jackie Mason, he was Dangerfield's mentor, and he used to you cannot go on stage with a name like Jakey Cohn. He changed it as to as foreign a name as he possibly could.
Yeah, I saw Mason in the Concord. Yeah, he was a frequent entertainer there, Jackie Mason. Yeah.
And I also said last thing, listen, if you read, my grandmother had friends who used to complain that they always gain 20 pounds when they go over a weekend in the mountains. And my grandmother said, I have yet to see a waiter put a plate of food into a guest's face and force them to finish it. So.
Yeah, well, I mentioned in my lecture, they had to check the guts out as cargo. They had to use a forklift. They gained so much weight. And then they'd eat everything off the menu, and ask the waiter for a side of whitefish. Can you imagine?
We had a request for your email again. Is it okay if I put it in the chat?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah,
so there it is. The email is in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. And I think on that note, our evening has finished.
Okay, well, thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who attended.
Thank you, Martin.
Please check your library for other programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.